I'm so happy that the threading is finally done. Things look a little bit messy at this time. Look at all that mess I have to get organized. But all of the heddles are threaded, all 378 of them, however many, 380, plus 2 floating selvages, and I made sure that they're both the same color, so they start on a blue and end on a blue. And now I have to come at the back here, and I've got a knot in each bundle of about a 1/2 inch, and I have to take these ends and try to match them up, and then I will tie them onto this metal rod at the back, which is attached to the apron, which will help to feed it around the loom. You have to be careful about how you tie on, because some people sometimes, I think I did this once where I tied it on in front of this back beam area, and in fact it has to come around and over on top of this, so I have to be careful about that. I'll end this section, but the threading is done, and the next segment will be tying on the beam and then winding the silk onto this back beam. Okay, everything is threaded, and what I've done is matched up the ends pretty closely, and then pulled the silk warp threads through, and I've put this thing with spokes on the top at the back beam, so that what it does is each of these spokes designates 1 inch of space in between, and I know my scarves will be 10 inches wide, so this will help me keep the warp threads very even as I wind it onto this back beam, which, yes, there is a manual crank. So even though I have a computerized loom, it doesn't do anything other than lift the harnesses up and down for me. Everything else I have to do. So I've got it secured back here. I'm going to be tightening up the threads at the front, and that'll lift the apron up here, and then I'll be winding on to the back. And at the front, I have 3 extra threads, which I knew I would have because I wanted to have what's called a floating selvage at each end that doesn't go up and down, and that helps even out the edges. And so for each of these 2 threads, I've got this special bobbin just to hold these 2 bobbins, each color on a separate bobbin. And as I wind on the 14 yards of warp, then I'll be winding on 14 yards of the extra threads, and that'll be great in case a thread breaks. And there's another one at the other side, and you can see I've got my lease sticks that I had separated my warp with, and now what I have to do is pull everything tight, holding onto it tight and pulling, but what I have to watch for is where the threads are getting caught up and knotted, like this little guy here. And as I was threading at the back, or pulling through at the back, of course it's always the last inch that's the knottiest, and pun intended on that one. But here I can see my warp, or my lease stick is bending a little bit, so there's something under tension, and whoa, that's really tight. So I gotta get in there, undo those little twists. This silk is very fine and is twisting on itself. You can see the little kinks in it, and it just likes to curl up together. So I got to straighten all that out, and then what I'm going to be doing is dividing this warp into 3 or 4 bundles, and I'm going to be using a method to beam the warp on that's relatively easy to do by yourself. There's these little bags of weights that my dear friend Pat Clark bestowed to me. She passed away cancer, and inside is exactly 1 pound of aquarium gravel, so that the weights are equal. And then I'll be using S-hooks and some little straps in here to bundle up the warp. I can't get that open with one hand, but I'll show you later what the result is. But first, I gotta untangle this mess. Okay, so I've got 2 pounds of weights hanging on each of 4 bundles of silk warp, and it's all straightened out going through the leaf sticks and then into the reed and then into the heddles and then all the way back here to the back of the loom, and it's tied on to this back apron, which is going to roll it around the beam. And so now all I have to do is start cranking this handle and it turns. So it's starting to come around, and I have to go around. This is where I get lots of steps. Check the front. Now I see there's a bit of a curved leaf stick. That means it's under pressure. Oh, turn it there. Just want to move my threads through the 2 crosses that I have. Keep that tension all nice and even. And you can see I did about 6 inches. There was about a foot hanging there. I can go just another few inches. And once the threads start going around this back beam, then I have to put some sticks in there so that the threads under tension won't all stick together. And so now I can see that my bundles are up near the top. So I get to straighten out. I'm going to take off this next choke. You see how it's keeping all my threads all together. Here's the long 14-yard warp. Goes all the way across the living room and more, and it'll be unchaining and have to do all this length. So it's going to take me a while to do that, and I will crank it on and I'll get back to you. So I've been at this for a few hours, and the winding on of the warp threads is going really well. I love this method of tensioning rather than having someone hold on and someone crank, because if you're right-handed, you could be pulling more on the right threads versus the left threads, or if you're left-handed, more on the left threads. But I still have quite a lot more work to continue with, but it's coming along nicely, and I've managed to get a few, maybe a couple of yards wrapped around the back beam, and I'm separating it with these flat sticks so that it can avoid having the threads all squeeze in together unevenly. So I just love this method of winding on. I can do it by myself, and although it takes a long time, it gives a really nicely even tensioned warp, and it works out really well. Stay tuned for when I'm done the warp. Yahoo! I have finished winding on. I have no more warp to beam on. Here's at the front. It's the last of the weights hanging. It's as far as I can go. You can see some ends here. So what I'm going to do is take these off, these hooks and cords, and take out these leaf sticks, and I'm going to tie it on to the front apron and bring that rod around over top where this warp will go under once it's woven. And as you can see at the back, there are 14 yards wound around my back beam. There's a lot of sticks. I was running out of sticks. I usually don't do warps that are 14 yards long. So the next segment will be showing you the actual tie-on to the front apron. Here is my loom all threaded up. The warp has been wound 14 yards. I've knotted it on, lashed it on to this front apron of the loom, and now in order to weave I need to put some thread on a bobbin so I can use it in my shuttle. Oh, I don't have a shuttle to show you, I'll show you later. And so I wind it around, and I've got this electric one with a pedal, and I just have to guide the thread on to evenly wind the bobbin, and an evenly wound bobbin is a skill that you have to develop. It's not too hard to do. I'm using this automatic or electric bobbin because it goes a lot faster. I do have a hand crank one, but this is really fine silk, so it would take me a long time to wind it by hand. So I'm thankful to have this electric winder, and I just have a hurricane candle holder which has my ball of silk, my cake of silk that I wound from skeins, and this container is just going to help the ball to not go rolling around the floor. So I'm just going to step on the paddle, and you can see I'm going kind of slow here, how it's going to build up, and I just go back and forth, winding it evenly. So stay tuned for the next video because we will be weaving finally. Well, we're not exactly weaving. I just wanted to show you sometimes things go wrong when I get too excited and I overshoot the end of the bobbin as I'm winding, and guess what? Wrapped onto the spindle. So I have to stop and take that out. Just letting you know that although it might seem easy to do and was going pretty smoothly, accidents happen.